Deep sea divers, what are your horror stories? Story 1. I wear contacts, so getting water in my mask is extra bad as I can't open my eyes underwater. Shortly after being told about a shark colliding with my friend from behind and removing his mask, I am pretty scared about this, not sharks in general, and I see a shark heading for me. They are curious, they often shoulder bump you as they turn at the last second. But she wasn't changing course. I stayed calm and still as long as I could, and at the last second before she hit my mask, I ducked. Except instead of ducking under, I just headbutted her right in the nose. Everyone saw and thought it was the funniest thing ever. I may be the only person alive who headbutted an 11-foot shark in the nose, but it was because I was scared she would take my goggles off. Story 2. Free dove to about 160 feet in Dean's Blue Hole in the Bahamas. It's where a lot of the freediving world records are set. Super neat place, Google a picture. Anyway, I'd never really been past 100 feet freediving, but this was the perfect place to do it. No current, there's ropes to keep you straight and allow a slight pull back up. Scary part is that you become pretty strongly negatively buoyant after like 60 feet. So you're basically hauling butt down while doing nothing and using very little air. So I'm dazed out a bit, feeling good and counting the lines that mark depth, and all of a sudden feel pressure like my trachea is going to collapse and wake up and realize I've counted to the line that's around 160 feet or so. Very scary moment because I wasn't sure if my body could take the depth or if I had gone too far and wouldn't have enough air to get back up, which is a much slower and more air-intensive process. Story 3. I got the bends once. I was careful, followed my charts and my computer, had appropriate depths and surface time, but I didn't drink enough water, so I was all out of whack. Felt fine until I got home, mild headache. Then I woke up and it was just pain in my left arm. Elbows, fingers, couldn't even bend them without bad pain. My headache was intense and I was so dizzy. Called my older, more experienced dive buddy, and I got rushed to the hospital. Docs got me hooked up in fluids, checked my dive logs while the decompression chamber was set up, and then got me in there with a nurse. 8 hours in a tube, about the length of a car, but as wide as maybe a double bed. I was on oxygen and hooked up to an IV, and it was so loud with all the air rushing in. As soon as I got to depth, the pain vanished. It was crazy. I'm fine now, obviously. But I wasn't allowed to dive for a month, which sucked, but hey, the dives were pretty great. Story 4. Diving the day before a hurricane on a small South Pacific island. Out of nowhere, a black and white sea snake, venomous, wrapped itself around my arm. Apparently, this happens from time to time before major storms. They can sense it and look for things that are heading towards the shore so that they don't have to put in so much effort to get out of the sea. As soon as I was in the shallows, it uncurled and headed up the beach, where it hid under a breadfruit tree. I thought I was going to get bitten to death by a snake at sea. Turns out I was just a taxi for a very calm but rather rushed reptile. Story 5. Saved someone from drowning while scuba diving. Person had an epileptic seizure at 85 feet of water in a pitch black cavern that I was diving also. I was hovering above just watching the flashlights move about when I noticed one flashlight not moving. I swam down and was met with the other diver with no regulator in their mouth, eyes open and just on their knees. The diver's buddy was next to them and in complete shock at what was going on and was not assisting whatsoever. 15 years of diving and instructor training came over me like it was second nature. I thought her regulator just came out, so I popped mine out and offered it to her when I noticed she had done mentally checked out. I popped my number 2 regulator in my mouth and attempted to put my number 1 regulator in her mouth, but her teeth were completely clenched. I then pressed the purged button to get air into her mouth and noticed her cheeks moving, so I knew air was getting in there. That was good enough for me. I then grabbed her under her arm and got the regulator flowing in her mouth and swam to the opening of the cavern and then up over 60 feet to get her to the surface. One on the surface did everything I was trained to do. Inflate BC, dumped her weights, got her on her back and started towing to land. As I'm towing her in, she is regurgitating all the water she swallowed and inhaled. It seemed like gallons of water. got her to land where other divers assisted me in getting all her gear off. She was breathing fine and alive, but in shock for a while and slowly came around like nothing happened. We were very lucky that we were only 10 minutes into the dive, or for sure we would have both been bent and spending time in a hyperbaric chamber. The crazy thing is, she didn't tell anyone she had epilepsy, and when we later reviewed her consent form, she checked off no to epilepsy. I put myself at risk, shooting up to the surface like that. But if I came across that situation again, I would not hesitate to save someone's life. Story 6. I was diving under an oil rig between Long Beach and Catalina Island. I was collecting sea scallops at around 60 feet or so, and knowing that there were seals all around, I always kept an eye out for sharks. You just can't help but think about them. So I was just about to finish my dive, but I was looking for one more scallop for dinner, and I saw a blur swoosh right by me just in front of my face. My initial immediate reaction was shark, but it was just a damn seal playing with me. I literally was screaming underwater for a couple of seconds. Funny thing is, I have over 25 logged open water dives, some at night, mostly around Catalina, and I never saw a shark. Story 7. Not my story, but my parents. They like to scuba dive when traveling and have gone several times over the years. Once they visited Mexico and went diving there before I was born. I'm not sure where they were exactly, but my mom was slightly lower down than my dad and looking at the ocean floor. He was looking up and around. My mom had on a gold necklace that was floating in the water around her. It was a sunny day and a fairly shallow dive, so it was sparkling. From my mom's point of view, she was going along, having a grand old time looking at the sea critters below, when suddenly my dad grabbed her and started frantically shaking her arm to get her attention. She looked up and a barracuda was directly in front of her, closer than was comfortable and staring intently, scary teeth on full display. It was focused on the shiny necklace and was just hovering there, transfixed. She slowly moved up her hand to cover the necklace, and they slowly and calmly moved away from it, and it took off without bothering them anymore, but still pretty unsettling and taught my mom to be a little more aware of her surroundings when diving. Story 8. I dive a lot, several times a week. My area has a lot of theoretically dangerous things: sharks and barracudas, morays and stingrays, blue-ringed octopuses, cone snails, box jellies, siphonophores of all kinds, sea snakes, stonefishes and scorpionfishes, venomous catfish, crown of thorns starfish, and various sea urchins that can hurt you in several different ways, titan triggerfish, and so on and so on. But only one thing has ever got me. Twice. Are you ready? Clownfish. Like Nemo. They are territorial and brave, and will get in your face if you're near their anemones. I usually respect their space, but I was distracted watching something else a couple of times. And it turns out they will actually bite if you don't leave their space fast enough. For real though, I don't have particular horror stories, but the scariest moments are probably when I get caught in strong currents and have to crawl on the bottom to fight it, going hand over hand like I'm climbing a horizontal wall. Despite what a lot of people tend to think, especially looking at the daunting list of dangerous animals in my area, sea critters aren't your problem. You leave them alone and it's fine. Sea conditions like waves or currents, and above all human error, are the real killers. Story 9. Was doing a boat dive and came up to find 20-foot swells. We just had to chill for a while down under until the boat would calm down and we could actually grab the ladder without getting smashed. I remember seeing the ladder going up and down 6 to 8 feet at a time. I finally grabbed the rope and climbed up as fast as I could. I hung onto the ladder, and the boat crew grabbed my BCD and hauled me out of the water and onto the swim step. Half the divers puked on the way back into port. That was the roughest conditions that I have ever been diving in. Story 10. It wasn't exactly a deep dive, but it was one of the most terrifying moments of my life. I was on a beach dive with my parents, having swum from the beach out to a small reef and then descending. It was only a few minutes after getting down to the reef that something started going on with my parents. My mother was agitated and clutching her chest. We surfaced and she started spitting up dark liquid and struggling to breathe. Fortunately, it was a busy beach, and after we inflated an emergency buoy, lifeguards rushed out and carried her back to the shore where an ambulance waited. It turned out she'd had swimmer's edema induced by the greater pressure. Things turned out fine, but having a medical emergency underwater in the ocean is a special level of scary. Story 11. I wear heavy prescription lenses and can't wear contact lenses. Halfway through a week-long live aboard dive trip, someone dropped a tank on my prescription mask and shattered it. I usually had a second set with me, but could not find them and only brought one because, hey, nothing had ever happened before. I am functionally blind without corrective lenses. I can see colors, and that's about it, starting about 5 inches from my face. I was devastated, but decided to go diving anyway, with my husband as my seeing eye diver. I could see my gauges, so I felt reasonably safe. It was among the most amazing 3 days of diving I've ever had. I saw the colors, shapes, and movement. Without being focused on the details, I actually took many of the best underwater photos I'd ever taken. I wasn't worried about focusing on a particular coral or fish. I was looking at the larger color patterns. So it didn't turn out to be the disaster I thought it was. Story 12. Only thing that really scares me is lung expansion injuries. So the one time I was freaked out was swimming near a wreck at about 100 feet. I lost perspective and buoyancy control and suddenly realized I had surfaced about 40 feet in 30 seconds or less. Visions of the bends and a popped lung instantly came to mind and dropped a ton of air from my BC to get back to depth in a hurry. Got a massive squeeze from it in my ears, but it gave me a chance to calm down and get a better sense of where I was and reestablish buoyancy control. Bottom line, the scariest things that can happen while driving is the crap you can do to yourself. Story 13. I was on a night dive looking for a resident six-gill shark when a large gray animal darted past me, just barely illuminated by my light. It was way faster than I was told this shark would be, and I couldn't quite make out the size. Then it happened again on the other side. Both times it was in my peripheral vision, barely illuminated by my forward-aimed spotlight and very fast. For some reason, when I got to the bottom, I decided just to sit on my knees and aim the light in one direction until something happened. As it turned out, the beast was a harbor seal, using the light to find fish to eat. She hung out with us for a while, which was a pretty cool experience. We never found the shark, but I did think I was being hunted for a bit. Story 14. The weather had been pretty hot and the water temp was also around 26 degrees Celsius. We'd done a dive and a long swim in the morning. We then headed out for our second dive, and the boat dropped us in the wrong spot. So we had to swim against a massive current to get to our intended site. Halfway into the swim, I just felt like I needed a nap. And so I closed my eyes and did exactly that. It felt so peaceful. I immediately dropped down to an even deeper depth and was lucky that one of the guys on the dive turned around at that moment and saw what was happening. He swam as fast as he could towards me and caught me. He asked if I was okay. I said I was, and passed out again. This time, spitting my reg out and started blowing bubbles. He then went behind me, shoved my reg back in, wrapped his arms around me, and took me straight to the surface. He saved my life. Story 15. Not me, but my brother. And not deep sea, sorry. He was 18, part of the dive club at his school. They went on a diving trip. The crew that handled the dive counted heads wrong. And halfway through the dive, the boat went back to shore without them. So there they were 2 kilometers from shore, with their only option to swim back. There were about 5 of them, 2 girls and 3 guys. All of them are between 15 to 18 years old. About halfway through, one of the girls couldn't swim anymore and started crying. My brother, along with another guy, swam with her, dragging her along, making sure she didn't drown. Everyone made it out okay. Worst part, school tried to hide it and had the audacity to suspend my brother from school for catching him with a beer while on the trip. Needless to say, they were in deep crap when it came out. Not sure exactly what happened, though. Story 16. Not exactly deep, but I was doing my certification dive for my PADI Basic Open Water Diver certification. I was at about 35 feet when my regulator started free-flowing. We'd been taught to put our tongues against the roof of our mouth to still breathe in that scenario, and it worked just fine in the 70-degree pool. Unfortunately, I was in a 40-degree lake, the temperature of which adds a bit of stress and anxiety no matter the depth. I was fine until the tongue technique didn't work, and I grabbed my backup regulator. When I tried to clear it of water and breathe from the backup, yet still managed to suck water, I panicked. Thankfully, it being a certification dive and all, there was a dive master with my little group. I signaled an emergency ascent, and he and I shot to the surface. I was in a complete panic like I've never known before or since. I was convinced I was dead. Once we got to the surface, he was smart enough to reach between my flailing arms and inflate my BCD. After a few seconds, he was able to calm me down, but I was unable to complete the dive. Every time my face went under the surface, I started having a panic attack. Eventually, I pushed through. Before it was said and done, I got my advanced certification, which involved a dive to 110 feet and a number of other challenges. Unfortunately, after that accident, diving gave me pretty bad anxiety and got to a point where pushing through was no longer worth it. It's been a long time since then, and I'm not sure how I'd react now. Maybe after all this time, I'd enjoy it again. Story 17. I'm hardly a deep sea diver. My deepest dive to date is 111 feet. This incident actually happened in about 8 feet of water, Crystal River, Florida, known for attracting manatees in the winter. They don't let you scuba dive there anymore, and the dive master suggested snorkeling this dive because it was shallow and it scares the manatees off. It was my first set of dives out of certification. I was putting my gear on, damn it. So there's two manatees in the immediate area. An older juvenile who was hanging out and loving the attention from the snorkelers, and what we assumed was likely his mother. I had a little disposable underwater camera. As soon as I hit the bottom, the big one approached me. I moved the camera out of my face, and she just got closer and closer, until she literally grabbed the regulator out of my mouth. Luckily, my skills were still very fresh in my mind, and I calmly grabbed my octo. But I spent the entire dive trying to get far enough away to get pictures of her. She was a nosy pest. Story 18. My family got certified while I was in high school. Our last dive was open water. We decided we would do it on vacation. All other dives were in the States in a pool. Wreck dive about 200 yards offshore. Not sure why, but Mom's tank went empty way faster than everyone else's while we were out at sea. She didn't realize it until it was less than 5%. We surfaced and started swimming back, but she panicked. She was an experienced swimmer and snorkeler, but she couldn't handle it with the other scuba gear. We whistled for help, and the locals thought we were just being tools. Didn't realize she was struggling. We kept her up and got her back. Finally, about 50 yards out, they realized we were towing in a diver in distress. Everything turned out okay. I haven't been scuba diving since. My brother went on to become a dive master. Story 19. Diving at Gordon Rocks in the Galapagos. We had hoped to see hammerhead sharks that frequent the area. This is a pinnacle surrounded by deep water and strong currents. Our guide had us hold onto the rocks and wait to see who came by. While we were waiting, a group of 10 reef sharks were circling above us, while two lager moray eels were popping their heads out a few feet away, opening their mouths, letting us know they mean business. Needless to say, I was a bit nervous and burned through my air at a rapid rate. Suddenly, a group of dozen hammerhead sharks came into view. We had not really discussed what we would do. The guide motioned for us to follow, and the next thing I know, we are swimming with the school of sharks. This only lasted a few minutes before they broke away from the group. We began to move into our safety stop zone where currents were pushing us in different directions, when I suddenly ran out of air. You don't get much warning when suddenly there is nothing left. So here I am 15 feet or so underwater, unable to reach my partner's secondary air, being forced to the surface when I should still be chilling. At least the second time I ran out of air. There was user error on my wife's part, anniversary dive, and I was able to get to the secondary air and get back to the surface safely. Oh, and then there was the time diving Bloody Bay Wall in the Caymans, where there is a 5,000-foot drop, and my partner was narked out and kept going deeper, nearly exceeding the recreational limit of 120 feet or so. If I had not grabbed her, she might still slowly be falling into the abyss. Diving is super fun. Story 20th. Night dive on the Great Barrier Reef with my partner who was learning to dive, myself, about 10 years of diving, and a dive master. First night dive for my partner, who had been hearing from the two of us about how incredible it is. Night diving is one of those amazing, life-changing experiences, completely different to daytime diving as the sights and sounds of the reef are radically different. Plus, viewing the reef through just the small areas of light from your torches changes how you process the experience. It's exhilarating and incredibly zen at the same time. As we're circling back to the boat, the sharks who have been standoffish but curious, as they usually are, come in, and one has an inquisitive bite of the dive master's fins. Never seen or heard of sharks getting this aggressive with divers, so the three of us damn near catapulted ourselves out of the water and cut the dive short. Have never been worried about sharks while diving until that moment. Normally, they're more afraid of you than you are of them. But not this time. Story 21. I was diving with a mom, her husband, and their son on a night dive. I don't know how many dives they've been on, but the mom, for some reason, decided to just go up without signaling anyone why. She did a thumbs up signal, which means she needs to go up, and when the dive instructor signaled back, asking why she just went up. So the guide is trying to get her to come down when a boat comes across and runs her right over. I forget the exact size of the boat, but it was a big dual motor. Blood was everywhere, and we had to rush out because there were a lot of sharks in the area. She died instantly, I saw. I didn't see much once we surfaced, as I was busy vomiting from everything. Story 22. Wasn't underwater, but on Gili Trawangan, near Bali, I took my rescue diver course. There were daily drills where we had to form a search grid and locate a weight belt with a swimsuit tied to it, going to 30 meters, and the teacher messing with our gear, etc. She really got me. She pulled up my mask and hers and started kissing me while sneakily closing the valve on my tank. As soon as I felt the loss of air, I took her spare regulator, got it sorted, and then turned my air back on and got my mask cleared. That same dive, we heard fishermen using dynamite to mass end fish. It sounded like my tank exploded, just incredible. Anyways, on the day of our final written test, we hear the usual whistle, signifying that it was time to go find a red weight belt or whatever. We were all complaining, saying the written test was in an hour. This was just too much. Teacher came running up, said, "Come to the beach." There was a crowd of people surrounding a man lying on the sand. We started doing chest compressions, checking airways, etc. We got a boat and took him on a 20-minute ride to the mainland. Then, we took him to the hospital, where we were told he had been dead for at least an hour. I had been doing mouth to mouth with a dead person for almost 20 minutes. Icing on the cake was that they gave me a heating pad and put it on my stomach to deal with the shock. The pad had an electrical short, and I got a hell of a shock. When we got back to the island, the teacher made us take the test, and we all passed.